Aaron, and great to be back here. I keep forgetting how bright these lights are, but it's always great to be here and share the latest thinking around what's happening in our industry, the energy transformation. I will talk about some of the examples that we're seeing around the world where we can definitely learn from in terms of the energy transition. I will also quickly talk a little bit about the energy transition. Although a lot has been said, I think what's really important to understand that this is not just about energy. And I think Ed and Sherry touched on it a little bit, but this goes to the core of how we produce goods, how we deliver goods and services, how we live in cities and communities, and how we move people from A to B. This energy transformation goes well beyond cheap renewables and storage, well beyond electrification of transportation, well beyond energy efficiency of buildings. And I think the more we understand how enormous this transformation is and how quick this transformation moves, the better we get to the right answers and are able to really not only drive the energy transition forward, but to accelerate the energy transformation. A lot of stories, and I will tell some stories as well, but also facts. I have 600 people around the world doing work around the energy transformation. There's a lot of facts, and there's also some predictions and some stories, and this will be a combination of it. Winners will be those countries, those states, those cities, those companies, large and small, and those utilities that have the vision, that have the courage, and that have the ability to execute. It is not easy. This is not easy. This is hard. And some in the room here, some utilities and some states are trying it. And we're not saying it's not easy. The good news is it will become easier because the technologies and the solutions are here right now to decarbonize our economies at an accelerated pace compared to the last 5 years. This is not about if, this is about when. This is not about what, this is about how. And that is very, very important. In the next 3 to 5 years, we'll have electric cars, any model that you want, at the same total cost of ownership or lower than combustion engine cars. And by the way, they are way better to drive. Solar and storage is getting below 10 cents per kilowatt hour in places like Hawaii. 6 out of the 7 bids for a recent storage plus solar plus storage RFP were below 10 cents per kilowatt hour. That changes quite a bit. But again, not only on the energy production side, I think Sherry alluded to clean gas, renewable gas. Yes, we see biomass coming into the system. We see hydrogen, green hydrogen coming at scale in the system, specifically in places where we do not have enough infrastructure to build storage to get us through very long periods of time where renewables are not producing what the system needs. The Northeast, the Netherlands, where I'm from. We have these long, cold winter weeks where renewables are probably at the low end of their production, and we're going to need a renewable gas at scale. If you don't put 9 gigawatts of offshore wind in the Northeast, but 180 gigawatts, which is now the plan in the North Sea in Europe, then you don't transmit 180 gigawatts onshore. Very complicated, very expensive through traditional transmission. What you actually do is you liquefy water, HO2 at sea, power to gas, and you put it in a pipeline which then goes onshore, and heavy industries will use it, heavy transportation will use it, and ultimately, a little bit further down the road, you can actually use it for household uses as well. Those type of breakthrough technologies are starting to not only be piloted and tested, but actually being rolled out at scale right now. And I have an example about that in a minute as well. So, what's driving the energy transformation? And a couple of facts, and Ed touched on a couple of them. 18 of the 19th warmest years have occurred since 2001. Only exception is 1998. Warmest year in history, 2016. In April of this year, CO2 levels passed 410 parts per million. It has steadily grown up, increased since 58, from 358 to 410 right now. That's alarming. Last year, we had 14 major events in the US alone of $1 billion of damage because of natural disasters. That's the highest number, except for 2017, 2011, and 2016. In 2017, US had 16 major events with $350 billion of damage to our energy infrastructure. Here's the most interesting fact. In the last 40 years, we've had these events on average about 6 a year. In the last 5 years, we've had these events 12 a year. That's what's happening with climate. That's what's happening with the impact on our infrastructure, on our cities, and on our communities. Those are all facts. One prediction is that by 2100, 7 cities in the US will be completely or partially underwater because we expect that sea levels will rise anywhere between 10 to 12 feet by then. So New Orleans, Atlantic City, Charleston, Boston, Virginia Beach, and Miami, where I live. We had Irma coming through a year and a half ago. We had 6 foot of water in my neighborhood. My house was built after Andrew, so I was well protected, but I had neighbors that had 4 feet of water in their homes. This was a storm that hit Naples. The eye of the storm was in Naples. We got the back end, and we got all the surge into our neighborhood. This is serious, and we need to address it. I live in, I'm from Holland originally. We've been building dikes for centuries. US at this moment is not well prepared to deal with this, and this is a high priority. The second thing that is happening is our energy ecosystem is changing. It's becoming cleaner, it's becoming more decentralized with distributed resources. You guys have heard about this. It's also becoming smarter, digitalization of the grid, and it's becoming mobile. Mobile is very important. If 20% of the EVs in the US were electric, that is 300 gigawatts of capacity available for you behind the meter. 300 gigawatt of capacity. If 20% of the cars in the US, and we'll get to that at some point, are electric, that means you have a huge capacity behind the grid, which you should optimize to reduce the overall cost of managing that grid. We'll see more platforms around buildings, around e-mobility, around DER, but we're also seeing is that the fuel mix and the fuel foundation will change. We're not gonna get there with just electrification and storage and battery storage. It's just not gonna happen. It might happen in certain parts of the world, but it will not happen across the board. So we need a renewable fuel. We need something like hydrogen coming into the system and becoming a carrier of and a storage of electricity. This is about climate change. This is about leadership. This is about collaboration, and this is about innovation. And this is what will be key for all of us to accelerate the energy transformation. And I will talk about 4 examples here. And it's always a risk of when you use some of these examples. There's many more, but I highlighted some that really go to the core of, I think, what's happening. McDonald's, a couple of months ago, announced, and by the way, McDonald's, 37,000 locations, 69 million customers each day, by the way, 20 billion in revenue, a global corporation, large player in the food industry. They've committed to reducing greenhouse gas emissions by 36%, as well as reducing emission intensity by 31% across their entire supply chain. They're collaborating with all their suppliers to reduce carbon emissions and reduce emission intensity. This will prevent 150 million metric tons of greenhouse gas emissions by 2030, which is about 32 million passenger cars on a yearly basis, or planting 3.8 billion trees and growing them for 10 years. These are huge ambitious targets for McDonald's. Here's the kicker. This is not only about renewables or making their stores or their kitchens more efficient. Yes, that's part of it as well. But they go at the core of their operations, which is beef production, which is logistics. And we're helping them now improve their logistics processes, make them cleaner, make them more sustainable, and reduce them by 30%. Look at packaging and waste. A lot of ideas around making some of their processes more circular, because that's another part of this energy transition, is how can we make our economies more circular and reuse waste from certain parts of the supply chain into other parts of the supply chain. Huge undertaking. This is what's driving the energy transition. McDonald's is just one of the examples. All major companies have initiatives in place right now and teams working on this. A second example is Denmark. And Denmark a little bit extended to Norway and the Netherlands as well. What's happening there around offshore wind is that they will build by 2045 180 gigawatts of offshore wind. And they will create these hubs, these offshore wind hubs, which can handle about 30 gigawatts, coming to one point and then going onshore, either through traditional power transmission or through hydrogen. And hydrogen will come into the port of Rotterdam and will go into a hydrogen network for transportation throughout Europe, which really fuels heavy transportation in Europe. Again, Europe will need hydrogen. We've compared a system without gas and with gas. A system without gas, 100% electric, is about 200 billion euros more expensive each year. A very interesting study. It's called Gas for Climate for those people that are interested. These are groundbreaking technologies and innovation at scale that will get us where we want to be by 2030, 2040, or 2050. Third example is New York. And I know a lot has been said about New York and New York REF, but this is really cool. REF Connect is a platform where utilities work together with government, with large consumers, with the cities, to innovate and bring ideas around the energy transformation to the table, develop business cases, and drive collaboration. There were so far 250 ideas generated. 150 utility-to-market conversations have taken place. 13 partnerships are in development. We don't speak the same language. The state, the city doesn't speak the same language as the utility, as the large corporations in our states and cities. This is a platform which really unifies language, what we mean by return on investment, and bringing the best ideas to the table to drive innovation around buildings, which is a big challenge in New York, to reduce carbon emissions from buildings, transportation, and beyond. A couple of examples. National Grid is exploring a project that will utilize controllable water heaters. NICEC and RG&E, two Avangrid utilities, are selecting a company for DC fast charging. And Central Hudson is partnering with an EE provider to provide energy as a service. The last example is San Antonio. I think there's some people in the room here from San Antonio. Really interesting climate action plan, very progressive. Please read about it. This is not hard, this is not easy, this is hard with all the different stakeholders, but I think they set a big step forward in terms of driving this energy transformation. Last slide. We need climate action leadership. This industry, I think, has the moral obligation to lead. It's also good business. Shareholders want it. Customers want it at this point as well. Winners and losers. Investors are closely monitoring companies that are ready to transition and the ones that aren't. If you're not ready, it will have impact on your business, on your customers, on your shareholders. You have to prevent the Kodak moment. The Kodak moment will happen, and stick with it. It's hard, but it will pay off. If you are a leader and you're laser focused on your clients, the solutions are here, the technologies exist, you will be ready to disrupt your own business and lead by example. Thank you very much.